Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, looking at corporate performance and budget matters. I'm Councillor Will Adams and I'm Chair of the committee. We have committee members in the Civic Centre along with officer support. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and will be available on the Council's website. Just some housekeeping for those in the Civic Centre. We're not expecting any fire drills, but if the alarm does go off, please leave by the emergency exits at the back of the room and congregate on the rear car park. Can I also please ask those in the room to please turn off the mobile phones and switch your microphones off when not speaking, please. For those joining us via Microsoft Teams, please remain muted and indicate at the appropriate time when you would like to speak, and I will bring you in. We will now move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Chair, all members are present, thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting held on the 12th of June. Any comments? Are we happy to sign them off as a true and accurate record?
Seconded.
All those in favour? Thank you. Have we got any declarations of interest? Okay. Agenda item 4, scrutiny recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Updates have been provided on all the recommendations from the last meeting. I'd recommend that those that the committee are happy with that are completed as yes are removed, and that those that aren't completed remain on the list, and an update will be provided for the next meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't think there's any. I think everyone agrees with that. We need a vote on it. Then we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the South Ribble Q1 Performance Monitoring Report 23-24. In the absence of the leader of the council, who sends his apologies, Councillor Aniela Bielinski-Gelder, Deputy Leader of the Council, will present this item, supported by Chris Sinnott, the Chief Executive. Can I please welcome you to the meeting this evening and ask you to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to pass on the leader's apologies, but as you've done it, I don't see that I need to. I'm really pleased to be here introducing this Q1 Performance Monitoring Report Scrutiny. We have ambitious targets for South Ribble in terms of dates, objectives and project outcomes. And I'll give some headlines and then I'm happy to take any questions with the support of the Chief Executive, Chris Sinnott. So in summary, 75% of the corporate strategy measures are performing on or above target, which I think is excellent. 57% of key service delivery measures are performing on or above target. In more detail and in terms of the deliverables, South Ribble staff are currently delivering on a number of fronts and it's extremely impressive. On the 28th of May, over 3,200 people attended Music in the Park at Worden Park. The initial survey results showed huge satisfaction rates, with 83% rating the event 8 or higher and 96% saying they would recommend the event to a friend when asked. The majority of people want the event to continue moving forward, so those are really strong indicators for that event. In addition, we can estimate the event boosted the local economy by approximately £196,000, and that's backed by a government economic impact calculator supported by feedback from the survey. The officers are also busy delivering our cost of living action plan, which has a whole raft of support from Household Support Fund, the school uniform shop, holiday and food programme, the HAF programme that most people know it as, food banks and the community shop, winter warmth, social prescribing, which has just launched on the 1st of September, making people aware of the credit union for low interest rate loans and other non-high street financial services. So the cost of living crisis action plan is well underway. We're continuing our programme of play area refurbishments, just completed Ryden Avenue and now working on 3 in New Longton, as well as the new Hope Terrace, Lostock Hall. And as you can see from the report, overall employment rate has improved in South Ribble compared to the same time last year and is now above the regional average. Another positive is the number of calls to the call centre gateway that have answered in 90 seconds has continues to improve, improving better than what we've targeted. In terms of identifying where more support is required, I can highlight some which are measured in amber, which means there's an early indication and a risk to them becoming off target. The Leyland Town deal is a huge £25 million project, which we need to get right from the start. And once the design stage, REBA 3, is completed, which includes namely the development and design stage, there should be speedy resolution. In addition, due to the ambitious and challenging timescales of turning Green's dance studio around into community support space, extra mitigating actions have been put into place to reduce the delays in conveyancing and/or refurbishment. The acquisition is now complete. Finally, there is a small percentage of other indicators off track, which are down to a variety of reasons. Some we do have control over, others we don't. For example, staff vacancies, reduced EU funding and market conditions. However, these reports provide us with regular information and updates which we can use as an administration to inform us on our future decision making. We accept as an administration we cannot be 100% effective 100% of the time, but the 14 projects, 86% or 12 are rated as green or complete, and 14% or 2 are rated as amber. Given our ambitious agenda, the team at South Ribble are consistently pulling out all the stops to meet our residents' ever-changing needs. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of those who contribute to the report and the outcomes noted in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And we do have a variety of questions to go through, of which I will ask the first one. Can I just take you to page 18, paragraph 9? Throughout the report, the 5% tolerance is mentioned, which makes the report harder to read and follow. What is the purpose of having a tolerance, and is there any way this could be streamlined to improve understandability of the report? I think
as this is a technical question on the report details, I think it's probably best if the chief execs, but I expect the answer might be that there has to be parameters put in place in terms of the lowest and the highest, and it's measured through that percentage.
And by which that you won't concentrate, because otherwise you could end up with the situation where you're developing action plans for something which is relatively close to actually hitting target. So it's to make sure that we concentrate our efforts in our reporting on targets that are significantly off track. So it is really just to make sure that we're concentrating by exception, which is what we aim to do in performance management, is you concentrate on those areas that need your focus and attention, to make sure that you're bringing them back on track.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Green.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Can I welcome the Chief Executive and the Deputy Leader of the Council? In Councillor Blinsky-Gelder's introduction, you referred to 75% of targets either being met or being exceeded, but the report doesn't confirm that. So could you just clarify that for me? I'm looking at the report, and the report says 67% are better than target and 8% are worse than target, but within that tolerance. So are you adding those two figures together?
So I took that from a highlight report that the officer provided, and it is exactly like you said. They've taken the difference, they've found the difference, and found 75% of the corporate strategy measures are performing on or above the target within the 5% threshold, and 57% of the key service delivery measures performing on or above the target with the 5%.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, but I'm sorry, we'll have to agree to disagree, because those 8%, as it sets out in this report that we've got, I think on page 18, 8% are performing worse than target. I accept that they're within this 5% tolerance. Now, we can probably argue all day as to whether or not we should have these tolerances. I understood the question that the chairman asked. Personally, I don't like the tolerances, but if we've got them in, that's fine. But nevertheless, those 8% are worse than the target. They are not at target or above target. So I think we just need to clarify that, please.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I disagree in terms of your percentages, because if you didn't have a 5% above and below, then everything would be a priority. So you have to determine what the priorities are in some way. And I think there has to be some where it becomes an exception or doesn't.
Okay, thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for being here. I want to bring you to page 19, paragraph 15, just about music in the park. I know, Councillor Belinsky-Gelder, you said that we've gained you said there was 196,000 benefits from music in the park, something that isn't in the report. I was just wondering how that number's been formulated.
So I do have the report which is coming forward on music in the park. It's the most up-to-date data and information. The corporate monitoring report provides the data up to when they produce it, and then we get extra information as more and more information comes forward. So this report is ahead of, if you will, ahead of the corporate one. And in here it says, using the data we have from the event and the feedback survey, it is estimated the event boosted the local economy by 196,200. It says this data was created by using a government-backed economic impact calculator and feedback from the survey that asked how much visitors spent in the borough outside of the event. So they obviously needed two different calculations or different things to put into the system, and that's the number which came out. I think that Chris is happy to go into more detail if you need it.
So just to clarify, 196,000 is that net? Is that, have we spent X amount, spent 200,000 and 196 back? What's the case?
So no, the 196,000 is talking about the low impact on the local economy. So the 196,000 is an estimate based upon the information received back in the survey, and then it's extrapolated using a tool that is provided for people who look at destination management, but it's about the local economy. So it is entirely separate to how much we've spent on the event and how much we've earned through ticket sales and things.
Okay, that's understood. So it's completely possible that we've spent more than we've brought in from this event. Yeah. From the back of that then, I was reading this and it said that the successful event boosted the local economy. I guess if we're able to start getting those numbers to see how much is it we spent, how much is it we've actually made, then that would be able to help us work out whether that is actually the case. As well, within this, in terms of the numbers that's been calculated, then it says that we're looking at food vendors, face painting, etc. Are these vendors all from South Ribble, or is it benefiting companies that are from external boroughs?
Thanks for that. So the first point you made about whether it's the cost benefit analysis, basically, if it costs us what we're getting back for it. I think that we accept that in the first couple of years the event is going to cost us, but as we've seen from the satisfaction survey and the number of people that want to come and the number of people that are going to tell a friend about it and the increase in ticket sales between the first and the second one, I think that the event speaks for itself in many respects, and hopefully it will actually make us money in the future, and more importantly make the local economy more money. what was the
Local businesses.
Oh yeah, so as far as I know, all the vendors are local. They might not necessarily be local to South Ribble, but within the Lancashire. The company which runs the music festival, they're local as well.
Okay, good to know. And I do agree that it's a good investment if it's something that we can start making money in the future. So my next question is, what progress is actually being made on making the event either cost neutral or generating a surplus in future?
Yeah, so I'll start, and if you want to come in, but in terms of the report which I've referred to, that's going to come forward with those proposals in it. We're going to look at the companies that we use and the vendors and all the different ticket sales, how we advertise it. So it's always up for debate. It's always up to be evaluated so that we can make the most of the event. I don't know if Chris wants to come in.
Yeah, it's anticipated that we'll be bringing a report to full council because obviously there would, if the event is to continue, it would need to have budget provision, and within that there would be consideration for members in terms of the gross spend, the anticipated income, and then from that the net spend and over time. So there is no recurring budget for music in the park. It will have to come to full council as part of budget planning or in advance of that. And it is currently anticipated that we'll be coming to the one of the forthcoming full council meetings with that request.
Thank you. And forgive me, I don't know whether you fully answered my question. It was more to do with what work is actually being done to ensure that we can actually turn this from what's potentially a loss-making exercise to actually making it into something that we can make money from in the future.
So the work is planned to be presented within that council report. So the work will include things Councillor Blinsky-Gelder has referred to around looking at how you advertise it, the ticket sales, the ticket prices, the things that you might have around it in terms of vendors, because vendors, and there are different ways in which it can be done, that vendors may pay for a pitch or they may provide proceeds from their sales there. It will also look at the acts that we have on and looking up how those acts might be able to attract in more or different audiences. And so it's all those things that go into the mix. It is likely that any sort of event of that size will cost money for quite a number of years before it starts to make money, because it has to build a reputation to be able to attract people, though. So that would be planned to be presented within that council report that would be seeking views of members and permission for a budget.
Councillor Howarth.
If I could come in with 2 or 3 questions, possibly. You say that you've done your satisfaction survey and 3,200 Bananarama fans are really happy. Well, I would be if 100,000 other people were subsidising my afternoon out. How much did we lose last year? Because presumably we know what the figures were for the first time we did this.
Unfortunately, I don't have the figures with me from last year, but I can certainly find out and send you that information.
Well, I find that a bit staggering that we're losing money, but you don't know. Can I just raise another couple of points as well? If you're going to bring reports to scrutiny, can we have some actual solid figures, not we sold tickets to over 3,200 people? Surely you know how many tickets you sold. And just on another point within that report, you encourage visitors from across the region to South Ribble. Do you actually know where any of the visitors or the 3,200 plus people actually came from? Or is that just a statement that sounds good?
I think the figures are slightly different, because the number of tickets that are sold might not necessarily be the number of people that go through the door. And the ticket sales, when you buy them online, you get a postcode, you have to put in your details so you kind of know the geography. And if there's people who we haven't captured in the survey after the event, then we ask them again where they've come from. So it gives us a general idea of where the demographic of the festival is coming in from.
Very quickly come back. So the people without tickets, are they paying on the gate, or are they just getting in for nothing?
I think it's more that actually the people, everyone will have a ticket, but you might not have captured postcode information for everybody who's going on an individual basis, because there will be some generous people who will buy tickets on behalf of friends and family. The other thing to note is, of course, this is the quarterly performance report referring to the period up to the end of June. And so it is a point in time. And if you think back to the end of June, the music festival had just happened, which means we haven't had the opportunity to capture that data that Councillor Bilinski-Elder is then talking about, and which will then come forward to be presented to full council. So that is why there is a slight difference in information, because the quarterly performance report takes the position in those key projects at the end of quarter one.
Okay, thank you. Can I take you to page 19, paragraph 16, around social prescribing? What outcomes are expected from the social prescribing programme?
Yeah, thanks for that. The social prescribing has just started on the 1st of September, and it is, like it describes, a referral pathway, and it's where we've got officers sat upstairs, and they get people who are struggling financially or with lots of different issues come through, and they signpost them into the right places. In terms of the outcomes, I think that you're probably better in terms of the detail, but I just think it's taken us a really long time to get where we are on this. We've worked with the health authorities and things like that, and it's a really beneficial and useful service that we've now got in-house, and we can look after residents face to face, basically, and support them in the ways that they needed to. Thank you.
If I can just add, in terms of maybe some of the detail, the NHS, when they created social prescribers through the GP contract, anticipated that actually that the biggest impact would be that there should be a reduction in demand for GP appointments, because people would be provided support beyond their medical needs, which is often a reason for repeat appointments being made with GPs. In the longer term, there should also be reductions in admissions to hospital, because people are provided but greater amounts of support within their community, and less demand on other statutory services, such as, for example, social care. So that's the kind of global reason that the NHS brought in social prescribing within the GP contracts. Obviously, South Ribble has gone further than that, because actually South Ribble Council has made a decision to also fund some social prescribing posts. That was on the basis of the anticipated outcomes that the NHS expect, but also because a piece of work was done for the South Ribble and Chorley partnership around about 18 months or 2 years ago, that compared social prescribing that was undertaken in South Ribble, embedded within primary care networks, within GP surgeries, and social prescribing that was done embedded within Chorley Council. And so we were able to do a compare and contrast of the outcomes experienced. I am going to be vague on numbers because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but the outcomes were fairly impressive. So of people who were supported through the social prescribing service in Chorley, embedded within the council in a similar setup to the one that we now have as of last week here, we saw reported feelings of loneliness decreasing by somewhere in the region of about 70 or 80%, reductions in reported need to visit GPs by around 80%, and you can, albeit on an academic model, cost that up and identify savings of hundreds of thousands of pounds to the public purse over time, because of that contact that is no longer needed, because individuals have been able to get support via a social prescriber to increase their work within the community. So that's either support from friends, family, or community groups. So it's a bit vague on some of the numbers, but it's those prevention and early intervention that we're hoping to achieve.
Okay, thank you. You talked about the partners that are involved in this in terms of the primary care network, etc. So how are the council's social prescribers going to interact with them? And also, how are they going to interact with the council in a wider sense, in terms of members and obviously also residents?
Thanks for that. It's going to the people will be referred through an acronym called SRIP, South Ribble Integrated Team, and if they reach, I think they've got to reach a certain threshold in terms of crisis, and then they go into there, and it's got a representative from the police, from Women's Hostel, different support networks around South Ribble, and then they go, their case, if it were as it were, goes into the SRIT, and the SRIT decide how they're going to support that family or that person, with all the different referrals like citizens advice, the health, and all the different services that we're linked in with.
The other place that they will actually get referrals from is from within the council. And so if you look, for example, with our homeless team, people don't just become homeless. There is normally a whole plethora of different reasons. And whilst our housing options homelessness team will provide an enormous amount of support and they have got a job to work through dealing with our statutory duties and support for getting sustainable accommodation. Social prescribing can provide other support and other mechanisms to make sure that people are able to get a good quality tenancy or accommodation at the end of any process. So you will see it in there. You will also see them over time becoming involved in multidisciplinary teams within the primary care setting, where we have the contract with the primary care network to provide that support.
Okay, thank you. In Penwitham over the last 12 months, we've actually had one of the social prescribers within the community hub. Is there a view of expanding this across the council?
I personally, I can only speak on behalf of myself. I think that they should be able to access any pathways that they can. But at the end of the day, the community hub, it's up to the hub to invite different people to come, and we can always reach out to the hubs and say, would you like a visit or a permanent member from the social prescribing team? Is that what you're saying? Then I would support that, definitely.
Okay, thank you. I think as we're only 11 days into the service starting, I think it would be unfair to ask if we've had any initial feedback, but I think we would certainly like to hear some feedback at future meetings, which I'm sure we will get. So can I please ask Councillor Williams for the next question?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening. I'd like to refer you to page 19, paragraph 17, where it talks about local community infrastructure. Reference is made to being an ambitious programme to develop local community infrastructure across the borough. We've got the Family Wellbeing Centre is highlighted, but what else is in this programme, and is it on track for delivery?
I can maybe start answering this, but if you want more information, go to Chris. So what was identified by the community hubs team was that we have some infrastructure which is really good for communities. For example, Moss Side's got Moss Side Community Centre, and Leyland has provisions as well, but Farrington, there's gaps in Farrington for provision, and Lostock Hall as well. So the community team identified where there were gaps, and we've used the UK SPF to try and fill some of those gaps, and one of them is the Greens Dance Studio in Lostock Hall. I know that we've also had discussions with the Farrington Bowling Club and Community Centre, but I don't think I've got a feeling that isn't going anywhere, but those are the two that I'm aware of. Thank you if you want to add.
I was going to say that's only two across the community, but obviously we've also got the Family Wellbeing Centre as well, and we've already mentioned that since it was talking about at council that it's getting put back a little bit between January and March next year. So when we will have a full idea of the timescales, and more importantly, are we going to be over budget on this now to what was already agreed?
So, and again, it's because the quarterly performance report is a point in time, and that does work both in people's favour and against them occasionally, because they can sometimes slip in good news and not have bad news, but it is to try and keep us on track. The Greens Dance Studios, the Family Wellbeing Centre, the at the end of Q1, one of the challenges was making sure that we actually did the conveyancing and purchased it. That has now completed, so that completed last week. The next challenge will be around making sure that the refurbishment works is done on time and on schedule and to budget. There's nothing at this point to indicate that that won't happen, but obviously we're only very much at the start of it because we're a week in, but that's part of the project management for this project.
Councillor Peat. Councillor Peat, sorry, yeah. I'm on a different bit.
Thank you, Chair. If I take you to page 20, paragraph 18, cost of living action plan. The Community and External Scrutiny Committee is looking at the cost of living crisis when it meets in October. Is there anything in particular you think the committee should be looking at that we can pass on to the committee?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that question. So I think that I will put housing at the top of the list of what we need. I think it's a bit late now because we can't build loads of houses in the next couple of months. It should have been done over years. But I think that if it was up to me, I would definitely put housing and housing people who are currently in temporary accommodation, housing people that are in precarious situations and families that might have been in bed and breakfast for too long. I would just like, I've got a chance just to say what we are doing as for the cost of living action plan, because we're covering so many things with the food bank, the household support fund, the school uniform shop, the HAF programmes fed thousands of children over the summer holidays and half terms and Christmases, the food banks and Christmas shop, the food bank network, the pop-up bike shop and the doctor bike. That's just a few things of what we're doing. But I think that if I was to look at this list, I think that housing is probably, but it's such a big thing, it's difficult to incorporate into a cost of living crisis action plan, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Can I just move it on to page 23 now, paragraph 26. We've got reference to an ambitious transformation programme for high quality and responsive services. Can you talk me through what the transformation programme includes and what is it trying to achieve and what difference we're going to see?
The transformation programme seeks to do very broadly probably two key things. One is making sure that we are able to deliver high quality services, and in doing that we need to make sure that we've got teams and staff who are engaged, they're happy, and they can do their jobs well. So from that flows a people strategy. We need to make sure that people have got the right technology to be able to do it. And so from that flows the digital strategy. And then finally, one of the key focuses over recent years has been around making sure that we can balance our budget. And that will continue to be a challenge into, actually in this financial year, as you can see from the report you're about to consider, and into the future next couple of financial years, which are not projected to be any easier from a budgetary point of view. And so the key objectives are good quality service and a balanced budget. And from there is quite a lot of activity, which focuses broadly around our people and making sure that people are supported to do their jobs well, the technology we use, and then also models of working, of which the biggest thing recently has probably been shared services. And members will be aware that the two councils, so South Ribble with Chorley, agreed a few months ago that the next service that they would consider sharing with building control. And so a significant part of this has been around developing a proposal and doing a review for building control, whilst also continuing to manage the development of other shared services that we've created over recent years, particularly ICT and customer services as they embed. Does that answer your question, Councillor Williams?
I think it does. I've got a small supplementary on the top of that, on about the same paragraph. So reference is made to channel shift and bringing through web forms and obviously ICT improvements for customers and things like that. How are we going to cater for those people who are unable to use technology or access council services? Are we going to continue to deal with them through the customer service centre? Is there a strategy for making sure that everything we've got is accessible and not just overly ICT and things?
Yeah, I think I'd like to come in here because I was over this portfolio with ICT and the gateway and all that. And I just think that it's fundamental that is always there for people who can't access services online, who can't access it on the telephone. And from the administration's point of view, as far as I'm concerned, those services will always be there for face-to-face contact with people that need it. There are a lot of people wanting a channel shift. They want things to be able to be accessed online, and then so we have to cater for everybody, and that's what we're doing. But we've got a lot of catching up to do. So we're still working on that. Thank you,
Councillor Pillinger.
Yes, further down the page on paragraph 27 about the civic centre and its workspace. There's been ongoing discussions on these. I note you say that feasibility has been undertaken, or is that being undertaken, and options will be brought forward. Are you able to give any idea on what sort of feasibility has been done and what options might be brought forward? Because this has gone on for some time. And when such things might actually be finalised?
I'll answer this one, as I think it's probably a relatively internally focused piece of work. So one of the reasons that it's gone on for some time is actually it has been a moving feast. We started this probably alongside the implementation of phase 1 of shared services, with the anticipated that having a lot of shared staff would change the dynamics of how people worked. Obviously, a pandemic came along and significantly changed the dynamics of how people worked. And probably until a year or so ago, it has been uncertain as to how sustainable and how sustained changes in terms of home working and office-based working would be. And so what we didn't want to do was to make physical changes to the building on the assumption that everyone's now going to work from home or everyone's coming back into the office, but to actually understand where is the best place for people to work. And so we've deliberately not moved particularly quickly on it. It has given us an opportunity for our IT team to do a significant programme of work around strengthening our network, rolling out significant amounts of new kit to staff, which do enable staff to basically work from wherever they need to do their job well. There are still challenges with that, as there always are with any sort of technological solution. We have been concentrating on that. In terms of feasibility that's been undertaken, some of it's fairly straightforward. So some of it is about understanding what can you do with the spaces. So can you knock down some walls, or do they need to be there? Can you fit in certain numbers of people, and how do you make sure that it's done in a comfortable manner? So when we talk about feasibility, it is really nothing more complex than that. In terms of the where we're up to, it is likely that we would look at what is called the white space on the top floor, which is very useful as a kind of spare space for us, but is very underutilised. May well be refurbished as a new office space, with the potential that actually we would then move people into that office space, freeing up additional floors, because we still do have demands within South Ribble for office accommodation. And rather like we do with Job Centre Plus with CAB, it could potentially provide us with opportunities to let out more of the building, generating an income and making sure that we make good use of it. The conference centre is also referenced. All members will be aware that this AV equipment is working, and I pause as I say it in case it just falls over, but it has struggled. And we need to look at how do we make sure that the technology that we use both at our committee meetings and at other conferences continues to work. Is the setup on this ground floor the right thing to get the best from the space that we've got available to us, and all of that's working through. I would anticipate that in the coming months we will be starting to produce reports for consideration by members around what we could do with the building.
On both the white space and...
Yes.
Councillor Howarth.
Yeah, if I can take you to page 23, paragraph 28, the Chorley and South Ribble Partnership. How will the work to share data and intelligence improve services for our residents? What practical difference will we see? And what other projects is the partnership working on at the moment?
I just want to say, like, a brief overview that the partnership has got so many different people involved in it, and I think they all collect information, and I think it is really important. I remember when I worked for local government, I needed information off the primary care trust and they wouldn't necessarily give it me and things like that, and so I suppose it's formalising a way to make sure that we can share information and it's trusted, and that kind of thing. In terms of the detail, I'm going to have to ask Chris to answer it because I'm not up to date on the details of that, I'm afraid.
So I'll start with the data. So what difference does it make to our residents? Well, I think it was probably shown through COVID, because actually a lot of data protection was suddenly lifted and people were able to share data. So we were able to properly target our services. So if we refer back to the social prescribing service, actually, if we understood where areas of need were, we would be able to be more proactive in how we offer services rather than waiting for people to have to present to us. If I look, for example, at community hubs, if they wished, would be able to actually consider the data that's available and target work to smaller areas or particular pieces of work. And also, some of our partners, frankly, would be able to make use of it. So there are examples from within the partnership, working at the other council, where actually sharing basic, or what we would see as relatively basic information on an appropriate level around things like assisted bin collection can help GPs to better target things like health checks and other more targeted support, because actually the public sector holds enormous amount of data, but it holds it in silos, which means that we don't properly target services in the right way, or we start from scratch every time we want to do a piece of work. So that is the aim of that. So if you pushed me and said, well, what's the specific? The answer is I don't know. But my argument would be that actually we know that a lot of very important information is held, but it isn't used in an intelligent way to be able to make best use of the resources that are available to us or to health or to other partners. In terms of specific projects that the partnership is currently undertaking, that data one is a very big one. Social prescribers and social prescribing actually stems from within the partnership. Another place that the partnership is doing work is around economic growth. So the recently refreshed economic development strategy for South Ribble came from quite a lot of work that was undertaken via our partners. And one of the key aims within our strategy is around supporting people to develop skills for jobs now and for the future. And so one of the key partners on there includes, for example, Runshaw College. So we're able, through that partnership, to link up Runshaw College and other providers with businesses and people who can actually provide, for example, apprenticeship placements. So it's some of that stuff that is probably more practical.
Thank you for that. But there are parts of our borough actually border Preston, border West Lancashire. Presumably they have data and intelligence that we're not accessing. So perhaps what we're targeting isn't necessarily as good as it could be.
No, I think you're probably right. But actually, the work that we're doing through the partnership is I don't think it's called a pilot, but it's early work that should be then being able to be used across the whole of Lancashire, because it is obviously still difficult, but it is more straightforward to do it across central Lancashire of South Ribble and Chorley than it is to do it across the whole of Lancashire. But the idea is meant to be that it should be rolled out across the whole ICS area in the end.
Yeah, if I could just come back with one supplementary then, because I know there are various partnerships across the county. So are you saying that there is an appetite amongst those different partnerships to share information with each other?
I think there's an appetite for some partners, because obviously we are the only body that covers just South Ribble, and even with Chorley and South Ribble, most, if not all, of our partners cover a larger geographic area. So, for example, health, social care, police, fire service, all cover significantly larger areas. There is an openness from them to sharing data, but it is always very heavily caveated that it needs to be done in the right way, particularly from our health colleagues. And that's why this partnership project has been driven working with colleagues from the ICB, who are the kind of delivery arm of the ICS. So there is an appetite, but there's been an appetite for quite a long time. So I'm not expecting this will suddenly bloom into cross-border, cross-organisation information sharing really easily, but it is a step forward, or is aimed at being a step forward.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'm just going to move on to one of my specialist subjects here. Looking at page 24, paragraph 32, there's reference to an indicator around percentage of calls to gateway and contact centre answered within 90 seconds. Also in Appendix 1, there is another target for call handling, which is different from last year. Last year had a contact handling target of an abandon rate of 15% or lower. That target has now been changed to a contact centre inbound calls answered within a wait time of less than 5 minutes. So the target is 40%, and we're achieving 80% of calls answered within 5 minutes. So how is it decided to actually come up with that inbound calls answered within wait time of less than 5 minutes target? And how does that offer a better service or a better description of service than the previous target?
Oh, is it? So this is around the customer care policy, which I think I introduced. And what we did was we looked at the original targets, like you say, the abandoned call rate. And some people might hang up because they've been directed to go to the website. So we've changed the targets through the customer charter. And then I think the discrepancy that you can see is that the new targets haven't come in. The new indicators are not currently being recorded yet, I don't think. Is that right? But we're still collecting the original ones. And so it's the point in time again, I think, where we've not crossed over into the new data collection.
It doesn't say that in the report, because the report says a lot of other things reference Q2 onwards. What this says, it says in here is a new target for 23-24, and obviously we're talking about Q1. So obviously the information's there for the previous quarter. The information's there for the previous quarter. What actually is the physical target we're monitoring ourselves against, and how does that? If we're monitoring calls that we are actually answering, why is that a better target than actually monitoring the ones that we aren't actually answering?
The reason that the corporate strategy each year at full council sets a suite of indicators and targets, of which those are the ones presented within Appendix 1 of the report. Since the corporate strategy was adopted by full council, the Cabinet has agreed a customer care charter, new customer charter, and so we are in a bit of a transition period, because we don't change targets mid-year for the corporate strategy, because it's been agreed by full council and it needs to go back to full council if it's going to be changed. There were in the corporate strategy a number of places where we said this target is to be confirmed, which I think is what's reported within the report. As Councillor Belinsky-Gelder said, when we introduced new customer care policy and new customer charter, the organisation considered what is the best way of monitoring and measuring the service that we provide to customers. I think it was adopted in January time, and at that point there was a considerable debate and discussion around exactly this point. And the reason that going to average call weights was put forward was because it should give a better indication around the overall experience of people waiting, and frankly means that we can't come and say, oh well, it's because actually we have really good messaging on our automated system, which means that people put the phone down after 30 seconds. You will be able to see if someone phones up on average how many people are answered within 5 minutes. Obviously that is just a headline figure. The team monitor all of the other information around abandoned calls, around the average length of time that people wait, and how that peaks and troughs during the day and peaks and troughs during the week. But obviously we have to pick a small number of indicators that then come through to members for reporting.
I may come back to in future meetings. It's something that I've referred to a couple of, well, I'm new to the committee, but referred to a couple of times, and I've not really had complete answers on yet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Chair. At page 25, paragraph 34, the Business Energy Efficiency Scheme. It says out of 88 applications being processed, 5 have offers and 2 grants have been paid. What has the delay been in processing the grant applications? Do we know more around this yet?
The way that I understand it is there isn't a delay. It's just that's how long it takes for those the businesses to process the grants. To process the grants for the businesses. But if you wanted to know more information, I'd have to get back to you on that, I'm afraid.
Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, referring to page 25, paragraph 36, it refers to the town deal. It says that there's an engagement event in August, obviously, and that was last month. Were there any key things or anything that came out of it that you'd like to tell us about? Was there anything that might have a significant impact on anything that came out of that engagement event?
I've been informed that this might have been postponed, that event in August. So we're going to have to get back to in terms of what the event was, when it's been rescheduled for. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, just as a supplementary on that, we've rated this project as amber, and I seem to remember at the last meeting it was related as amber last time. Can you expand on the action plan and proposed steps to make sure this stays on track, and on how many quarters of amber does it become red?
So I think that it's like I laid out at the very start. This is a huge project that the government's announced, and we are making progress in terms of what's going on the street, but we're also having to look back at the plans and things like that, and look, like it says elements within the development and design stage for REBA stage 3. Once that's been, the amber is a risk warning. It doesn't mean that the project is in trouble or anything like that. It's just within that 5%, I suppose, where it's saying you need to look at it. This is an exception. You need to give it attention. And all I can say is that we have a programme board every month where we look at all the major projects, and this always headlines that programme board so that we can keep moving it forward.
Can I just ask, when we rate it as risk, is that in cost? Is it in timing? Is it a risk to cost? Is it a risk to timing? A risk to delivery?
So obviously within our project management methodology, it could be all of those things. I think with the town deal, it is probably more to do with timing and sequencing. We are at the point in the project, because of the way the town deal funding was bid for and secured, a lot of it is secured and then announced up front. You then undertake land assembling, and that is a challenge. It's particularly a challenge, frankly, when a big programme and a big amount of money has been announced, and that's the point at which we're at. That is probably the main driver for us raising it amber, because until we've secured all of the land assembly, we cannot be absolutely certain that we have full control over that programme. So that's why it's being rated amber, and why probably one of the key drivers why it's being rated amber for a number of quarters. And like Aniela says, it is difficult to say what tips a particular project into being amber rather than green, or amber instead of being red. This project, though, is a longer-term project than quite a lot of the others, and therefore there is more opportunity for us to be able to bring the project back on track when we dealt with some of those risks that we're currently facing.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. If I can ask you to turn over the page, and in paragraph 39 there's a reference to the economic strategy. Could you please set out what the economic strategy has actually achieved?
The economic strategy, as far as I'm aware, was launched about 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm not sure that we've got any measures or indicators coming back on it yet. I remember that Councillor Flannery took it to the Cabinet. It was really well received. It was really easy to understand. It was, highly thought of. So that'll be something that we're going to have to come back to the scrutiny on in a few months, because, like I said, it's only really just been launched.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm guessing that's a new economic strategy, but the report sets out that the project is actually complete. So was there a previous economic strategy, and if so, what are the outcomes on that, please?
So with hindsight, probably the title of the project should have been more develop and approve a new economic strategy. That was what the project scope was. It wasn't about delivering a whole strategy, because obviously an economic strategy would be delivered over a number of years. So the scope of this project that was agreed at full council was all of the engagement work that we did, the development work we did, the evidence base that we did, and then its adoption rather than the delivery of the strategy.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Please can I draw your attention to page 29, paragraph 51, all to do with the active health team. I just wanted to ask, since Q4, since the previous quarter, the number of people getting wellbeing sessions has fallen by 75%. How has that been able to happen?
Could you just, the 75%, where did you get that from? Is it within the report or just comparing it to the last quarter?
So the previous quarter you achieved 2,547 sessions. This quarter you've done 633.
So that's because it wasn't that the 2,000 odd sessions wasn't done in Q4. We report year to date, so that will have been for the totality of the financial year of 22-23, whereas this is just for one quarter. So we do it. These numbers will build during the year.
Okay, so now that's been clarified, then would you be able to tell me how the target's been missed and also you've achieved worse than in Q1 the previous year?
Yes, so as the action plan sets out, we had a small number of short-term vacancies within the team at what was unfortunately a kind of critical time. A lot of this team's work is done in and around holidays, and that's where a lot of the contacts happen. We had a small number, and as the action plan said, we had someone in the and I can't help but smile because someone was very pleased with themselves when they came up with the acronym of PASTA, the Play and Skills at Tea Time programme. That happens, and unfortunately we had a vacancy at the time, but as the action plan sets out, we've recruited to that, and we're putting on an additional session each week during this month, which is anticipated to bring that back on track. So yes, the target was missed in Q1 because we had a short-term vacancy. That is being filled, and we're now building the programme background to make sure that we can come back on track. It'll be something I suspect you'll want to look at as we get into the end of Q2.
The number of individuals who completed a health check screening by the active health team was also missed. You didn't even achieve 25% of the target. There was only 6 people in the entire quarter who actually managed to get one of these screenings. So would you be able to explain to me what's happened there as well? So again, as the action plan sets out, we undertake health checks as part of the Business Health Matters programme on behalf of Active Lancashire. Active Lancashire, the people who manage the overall programme, and also the people who ensure referrals into the programme. That programme was funded from ESIF European funding, which has come to an end. And so Active Lancashire are in the process of winding that down, which means the referrals have also wound down. And so, yes, the target has been missed and the numbers have significantly decreased, but it isn't anticipated that we're going to see an increase to that, because as the programme comes to an end, the referrals and the infrastructure that sits behind it in Active Lancashire are no longer funded, and they won't be following it through. Okay, so just to clarify, the reason why the health check screenings was missed is because of the lack of funding. The reason why the number of wellbeing sessions has been missed as well is because there was a staff shortage. So if staff shortages are the issue, could you explain to me what you've managed to do to rectify the situation?
Yes, because we've recruited to that post and have put an additional session on each week during September.
And with those new positions being filled, would you be able to explain whether that would provide the sufficient capacity to bring it back on track?
So as I said earlier, I anticipate that will be the case. I think it's something that we will need to continue to monitor. The anticipation set out in the action plan from the team is having an additional session each week in September will bring it back on track. Obviously, that is an anticipation, and until we've completed those and seen what the uptake is and the numbers attending, I don't think we can definitely know that, but that's where we'll be monitoring and paying attention to it.
Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Chair. Page 31. I know you touched on this before, the number of households in temporary accommodation. How confident are you that the proposed actions outlined will bring the indicator back on track? We also have the additional challenge, particularly around the asylum seeker policies, where it was 28 days and that's now been brought to 7. So it's just something that's in our spotlight, really. Thank you.
No, thanks for that. I'm not optimistic at all in terms of housing and people being provided with permanent residence. There's a list of reasons why. There's more than one reason why they're becoming homeless. The number of people is increasing. Landlord work providers are decreasing. Private renters are increasing. Debt, people are struggling with debt arrears. This all links back to the lack of housing, the lack of social housing, the cost of living crisis, and it's all adding up, and local authorities are actually carrying the weight, I suppose. We've got limited resources coming from central government to support us, and we're over the limit in terms of people staying in temporary accommodation longer than they should be. But to be fair to the staff at South Ribble and the resources that we've put in place, we have done and are doing everything we can to support people in terms of their housing. So I'm as optimistic as I can be in terms of what we're doing and what we're trying to do. But if resources aren't forthcoming to house people, then we've got our hands tied basically.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pillinger.
This is really a supplementary. I mean, you answered some of what I was already going to say, but are we cooperating with other agencies, neighbouring councils, the county and so forth to discover how other people are doing this as best as it can be done?
If I could help on this one, yes, we are. So actually, shared with Chorley Council, we have had someone in over the last 6 to 9 months, or no, maybe 12 months actually now, reviewing all of how we work through housing options and homelessness and providing us support and advice around that and recommendations for how we can improve. We are also working very closely with colleagues in registered providers to make sure that we're tackling the reasons that people might not be able to get into the Select Move system and in social housing. We have worked very closely with the county council, who have responsibilities around supporting people with complex needs, to ensure that we've got appropriate accommodation available to be able to provide support. So all those things are moving in the right direction, but actually the number of people presenting as homeless is significantly higher than it ever has been, and the options for people's housing at the other end is more limited probably than it ever has been. So the team are doing a lot. We've talked a bit about the social prescribing team that has just started. They will also be able to provide some support. The team will carry on working through it. They will carry on working as hard as they have done, but it is a really challenging situation.
Can I just push that a bit further? Everybody across the whole country is suffering the same problems, because they're problems of long-term decay in our infrastructure. The housing problems go back to the sale of social housing without their replacement and so forth. We've never built enough houses in this country since the Second World War, when we haven't done it through councils building houses. The private sector has a benefit to them for having a shortage of houses, because they can charge more then. I'm just wondering how far this net can be. Somewhere around this country, there must be people doing innovative things that are finding new ways of doing things with what meagre resources everybody's got. And I just wonder, are there networks? Is there something in the charitable sector that is networking people? How do we discover such things?
Hi, so I think that what you're proposing is potentially what you could add to your, the list that you had, where we could look at that, because we did have a cost of living symposium, if you will, and we could do something similar on housing. I think the LGA, the Local Government Association, is definitely a resource that we could use to look at and look for advice and support. But I just want to say that the homelessness crisis is crossing borders, if you will. So where we're supporting people are telling them to come to us, and we're telling them. So it's not something that's just contained in South Ribble, like you said. It is spread, and it's exacerbated by the fact that everybody wants housing all over. So people are moving around, trying to find somewhere proper to live.
Councillor Howarth. Just turn your microphone on, please.
Sorry. If I can just take you to page 31, paragraph 55, there's a bottom table action plan there. We regularly hear about challenges in recruiting to planning officers. What's being done to tackle this?
So locally in South Ribble, we have now, for peace of mind, we have recruited a head of service for planning, a new service manager, and we're in the process of recruiting further officers. In terms of why it's so difficult to recruit them, I think it's probably better if you answer that.
Which is a national problem, and actually the Local Government Association have just launched a new scheme for encouraging graduate planners into local government. So yes, we've been successful over recent months with, albeit it's a while ago now, Lizzie Hindle starting. Kath Thomas has more recently started as planning manager, or the new Stephen, because that's the post she's filling. We have struggled more to fill the post of planning policy team leader, but that is an additional post we've created to support the local plan process. We have also been successful in securing a graduate who is working through, and actually that is a big push for a lot of these areas where we know that there are national shortages in professions, is that our people strategy sets out a very clear intention that we will create training posts to support people in, even accepting that we accept that there will be probably a significant rate of attrition over years, but we have to plan on that basis rather than just going out to the open market, because that is becoming ever more challenging. The reality is, for planners, is actually a lot of experienced planners can earn a higher salary with, frankly, better conditions, because you are working for a single either agent or applicant. You are not trying to balance the needs of a local community against an applicant, against objectors. You can earn that in the private sector more easily, and that is a significant challenge which I think will be ongoing for at least a number of years.
Are we any further forward in addressing a director of planning?
Yes, we are. Members will have seen that we have over summer been advertising for a series of director posts, including a director of property and planning. The applications for that closed on the 2nd or 3rd of September, and we have had, although I am still to go through the stack properly, around about 15 or 20 applications for that post, and applications for all of the other posts, including Deputy Chief Exec, Director of Change and Delivery, which we are anticipating that we will appoint to at the beginning of October, once we've gone through the various assessment centre and interview panels for those posts.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, it's almost a follow-up question. So it's relating to that page 32 and the failing performance of our planning within this council. I'm sorry to say, both in terms of major applications and the smaller applications. We are not dealing with these applications in a timely manner whatsoever, which brings up a number of risks. There's a risk of penalties being imposed upon the council. There's a risk of applications being approved out with the control of this council by planning inspectors and the like. There's a risk of holding back the economy because we're not dealing with planning applications as quickly as we should be doing. And there's a risk of the pressure and the concern that brings to residents, as they know that planning applications are being determined, which have a massive impact upon people's quality of life, and they're not being dealt with in a proper time limit. This is significant. We can clearly see that the performance is both significantly worse than our own targets and significantly worse than Q1 for last year. So when can we expect us to be back in line and performing at or above the targets? How quickly can we see that, and what steps are realistically being put in place? I've listened to the point about the recruitment, but what other steps can be put in place to make sure we get back on course and on target as quickly as possible?
So the first thing to highlight, of course, is that yes, performance is not where we would want it to be, but actually, as the action plan sets out, certainly for major applications, but also for minor applications, it is a relatively small number of applications that have gone outside of time, which impacts on the percentage. Particularly for major applications, you don't need very many applications to go outside of time for it to fall. I note from the minutes and the action planner for this committee that it has been discussed previously around the approach taken by the planning committee to defer applications, and that has been included in training and briefings for members of the planning committee. That has had an impact on some of our performance. The reason being that actually if an application is close to time, what isn't included in here is where we have negotiated with a developer or an applicant to extend time. And you can do that, and it is perfectly legitimate to do that. It helps the planning process to work because often there is perfectly valid reasons why a application needs to be extended, sometimes because there's missing information that needs to be taken into consideration to make a good decision. But you can't do that if it's been presented to the committee and has gone out of time because a deferral has happened. So that was an important step for us to make at the beginning of this municipal year. Other work that we're undertaking includes making use of the technology available, so the application that is used within the service to make sure that we are properly managing and monitoring where our application's up to, that we are talking actively to applicants and developers around where their application is up to, what challenges there might be there, whether we might need an extension to time, and if they're comfortable with that. But you are right to highlight that if we weren't to tackle this, there's a risk of applicants deciding to appeal on the basis of non-determination. So the thing to highlight in response to your question of will this go back on track is rather like my point earlier, we measure these indicators year to date. So if you are off track in Q1, you are likely to be off track in Q2, because even if you had 100% on time in that period, this performance will pull you down. It's done that way deliberately because actually it means that you are recognising the true performance of a service over the whole year rather than just seeing peaks and troughs in performance happening. So I would anticipate that we should see improvement certainly to minor and other applications more rapidly. We have more applications of those, but we may not see it come back on track for a number of quarters because of that impact of that first quarter.
Yeah, can I thank Mr. Sinnott for a very full and comprehensive answer? And I understand the point about the lag of the figures, but will we start to see us matching performance equivalents, or Q2 matching the performance of last year or beating that performance and so on, so that over time we will then start to see the overall performance increase for the year?
So I think there are some applications which are still a hangover from us having vacancies and needing to improve some of our processes. So I think we may well see that there may be a bit more of a lag in terms of some going out of time, but we will start to see. I think we already have started to see the improvements, but they're in newer applications, and so it will take time for the overall figures to have that impact. So in the coming months, I'd anticipate that you will be seeing improvements to these figures, just not at the speed that you might otherwise hope, because you have applications that are older in the system already.
Okay, thank you. And that brings an end to questions from members on the committee. Are there any questions from members not on committee? I don't see anyone declaring that. Any questions from members of the public? Don't we have any of them? Can we therefore formulate any recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just some of the themes from the evening that the committee might like to consider as recommendations. The committee thanks the Deputy Leader and Chief Executive for attending and answering questions. The committee asks that the format of the report be reviewed with regards to the way tolerances are presented. The committee welcomes the assurance that the evaluation of music in the park is being presented to full council and requests further information on the income and expenditure of this year's event for committee members. The committee suggests that the social prescribing service links in with the council's community hubs. The committee wishes the social prescribing service well and looks forward to regular updates. The committee is grateful for the confirmation that we will continue to offer face-to-face customer service in addition to channel shift to online. The committee asks that the Q2 report provide further and more detailed information on customer contact performance data. The committee welcomes the offer of more information being provided on the Business Energy Efficiency Scheme and also the Leyland Town Deal Engagement event. Thank you, Chair.
Well, Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I thank Mr. Cranshaw for those suggested recommendations? Can I just query the one about tolerances that you made reference to? If you could just repeat that one, and then we can maybe discuss that. And I also do think we should highlight something in there about the planning system, because it is a concern and we need to keep on top of this.
Thank you. The wording that I use that we also up to the committee to look at is the committee asks that the format of the report be reviewed with regards to the way tolerances are presented.
I'm speaking out loud now, but do we feel as a committee that we should be having these tolerances at all? I mean, either as a council, we're either meeting a target or exceeding a target, or we are not. I don't personally see this need for tolerances.
I'll open that up to the committee. Councillor King.
So I would agree with that. I think as much as I appreciate what you've said earlier, I don't think it's helpful that we can disagree whether we've achieved a target or not. And I do think it will help hold people to account.
Chris.
I smile because my first job after being a graduate trainee was working as a performance person, so I feel I'm probably reverting to type here. We need to be really clear. When we report in this report that a target is off target but in a 5% tolerance, it does not mean we have hit that target. We have missed that target. So unless it has green starred, then we've missed the target. The reason for having a tolerance is to try and make sure that the action plans, which are summarised in these reports, but have a lot of work that happens behind it in terms of director and management teams paying attention to them, are focused on those that are significantly off track. So the reason I just push back slightly is that we need to be really, really clear that the 5% tolerance does not mean that we sit back and say, oh, we've hit that. It just means that the report concentrates on those indicators that are significantly off track so that members can really focus on those areas. It doesn't prevent you from asking those questions because all the information is within the report and within the appendix. And I would anticipate that if you saw that there was a lot of indicators that are sitting within that blue bit, you would be providing challenge to us. But the reason for doing it is because it allows us to focus the report on those areas that are significantly off track. And remember that a 5% tolerance is not 5 percentage points. 5% is 5% of the target. So it can actually be a very small amount before it trips into being outside of that area. And if we're not careful, I'll get out a chalkboard and start doing a presentation.
I can see the glee in your face, Chris, when you're talking about it. Councillor Howarth.
Yeah, but likewise, 5% can be a very big figure as well, depending on what your target is.
Councillor Pete, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, I fully understand your explanation, and I fully support the system we have in place already. Just from coming from that background from HMRC, it's extremely helpful to have that system in place, just speaking from experience. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that is a good way of prioritising things.
Okay, I think we may need to take this to a vote then, because I think there are some members who wish to make the recommendation to remove the threshold, and there are some who wish not to. Councillor Pillinger.
I'm hearing both sides of this debate and thinking I agree with both. And it's simply a matter of clarity in expressing the data. When we group things that are in green with things that are in blue, which we might easily do for ease of communication, what we've actually got is two different grades. You might see it like an Olympic athlete coming in. If they're coming in 5% behind the one who's getting the gold medal, they're in silver, irrespective of how close that is on 100 meters. You know, you're talking about tenths of a second possibly, but it's still. With it's still a silver medal or a bronze medal, and I'm not so I see that idea where you got this red, blue and green, I find that quite helpful, knowing where the blues are. What I don't find helpful is where the blues are grouped with the greens, because they're close enough to, if that makes sense. So I'm not certain that we need to change the system. I think I need to understand it better, and I need those who are reporting to be clear about what they're reporting.
Okay. Councillor Howarth.
If I could just ask one question, where does the 5% figure come from? Why not 10% or 2.5%?
I mean, this goes back quite a long time, but it goes back to the Audit Commission and comprehensive performance assessments. It's been around for that long. It was a kind of industry standard, I suppose, set by the Audit Commission. So that's where it comes from.
So in order to move this forward then, have we got an amendment to make regarding the recommendation around the threshold? Councillor Green.
Chairman, if I could, this is probably not something that needs a vote. I think we just need some clarity. If we can clarify the wording, personally, I don't know about other members, but personally, I'd be content with that. But it's just having that, making it crystal clear so that anybody looking at these reports can actually understand we're achieving the target, surpassing it, or no, we've not met it. And then we've got the detail behind that to focus resources where they need to be focused.
Okay, so I think if we can ask you to go away and ensure in future reports that we are crystal clear, on underline exclamation mark that, to ensure that which are within the threshold and which aren't. And does the committee, Councillor Green mentioned about the recommendation regarding the planning. Does the rest of the committee agree with that?
Chair, could I suggest some wording, then we're clear for the minutes?
Please, Councillor Green, some wording on that, please.
I just make a specific reference to the performance of the planning department, so that it's clear again, so it adds that clarity, and it's something that we can look back on. And over time, I appreciate it's not going to be instant, but over time, hopefully, we will start to see that improve.
Chair, could I suggest that the committee expresses concern with the performance of the planning indicators and welcomes the reassurance that performance will improve over future quarters?
Can I suggest a slight amendment to that the committee understands the past staff shortages, but is still concerned at the... I do think the staff have been working their socks off in planning. I've had stuff to do with them, and I think we need to affirm the work that they've done and not have something that's a bald, you've not done good enough, which is what this could look like without the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Plunger. Yeah, I think we've made reference to the national issues regarding planning, so we'll ensure that they're in there as well. Can we just confirm the recommendations then, Darren, in terms of the new ones that have been added, so everyone's clear, please?
So with regards to the planning one, the committee understands the staffing shortage and national issues affecting planning performance and welcomes the reassurance that performance will improve in future quarters.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for presenting. Moving swiftly on to agenda item 6, which is the 2023-24 Corporate Revenue Budget Monitoring Report and Reserves. I'd like to welcome Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, Cabinet Member for Finance and Public Protection, who will present this report, supported by Jeannie Waddington. Oh, she is here, she's coming back, but I'd like to present the report. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Jeannie's stepping in for Louise, who normally sits here, but she's on holiday. And Louise told Jeannie this meeting will be over by 7:30. So she's had to go and make a phone call to explain why she's not going to be where she promised to be at 8 o'clock, but she will return imminently. I make a couple of caveats before I make my remarks. Anything technical, I will defer to the experts, and anything really specific, questions about activities within directorates, I'm not the cabinet member for the departments and finance. So if you're asking a detailed question about something that's happening within a department, I might have to defer an answer until I can get one from the cabinet member responsible. And the final caveat is that this is quarter one of a 4-quarter year, and the forecasts that you're seeing in this report are where we would be at the end of the year if nothing changed. So, for instance, you'll see the headline figure is that if nothing changes, if we carry on doing what we've done in the first quarter, we will overspend our budget this year by £342,000. You won't be surprised to hear that as the finance portfolio holder, I'm determined that will not happen. And that's why we do quarterly reports. We look at things as we're going along so we can keep a track on them. A couple of things I do want to highlight. Once again, the government has offered the staff a flat rate increase of £1,925, which for us equates to about 7% of our budget. We only budgeted for 5%. So straight away, we're looking at a £200,000 overspend on staffing without any support from the government to back that up. You know, there's no grant to cover extra wages. We just have to find it within our own budget. So that's an immediate challenge. If you've looked at the report, and we've already heard, a real challenge for us on homelessness, a real challenge. Far more people reporting us homeless than ever before. If you'll forgive me for dwelling into party politics, over the last 13 years, housing benefit has not increased anywhere near what it should to keep track with rents. So if you're in receipt of housing benefit, you can't afford a private rented house in South Ribble, and Lord knows what you do in Greater London or the South East, but you certainly can't. So the private sector offer really is gone for many, many people who rely on benefits to pay their rent. And the social landlords that we have are not building. Their Progress, for instance, and they'll forgive me for mentioning them because we do have several other housing providers, have no building programme in South Ribble at the moment. So we're reaching a crunch point really where we're not building enough houses. Social housing provision is shrinking and shrinking. And the private sector market that we've relied on to fill that gap is becoming unaffordable. So we are, I think, Aniela, Councillor Belinsky-Gelder, forgive me, referred to, we're doing some real work with Progress all around the Select Move. Members will be aware of the Select Move process that people have to use to get social housing. For a lot of people who present as homeless, that Select Move process is really difficult to navigate because we've heard that a lot of people who do present as homeless have lots of other things going on as well. It's not just that they've lost their home, they've got other vulnerabilities. So we are working with Progress to try and ease that so that people who are homeless can get on the social housing ladder as quickly as we can. And the social prescribers, and one of the things we're hoping they'll do is stop people becoming homeless, so that if there can be people who have got challenging circumstances can be referred to the social providers. We're really hoping that they can stop people presenting in the first place. So we are hoping to get that figure down in terms of the projected cost. One other thing I would say is after COVID, we continued with what a far less prescriptive attitude to helping homeless people. People who were around will remember there was a scheme called Everyone In during COVID, which the government funded. The government have stopped funding that. And we tried to continue it as best we could to keep people from being homeless. But as other councils across the county have stopped doing that, you know, we actually know that some councils have been saying, well, I'm sorry, we can't help you. But if you go to South Ribble, they're still doing this. And sadly, we're having to roll back on some of that activity. It's really disappointing, but that is where we are on that. The waste service, you'll see, is overspent, and there's a few reasons to that. I know that the new cabinet member is really trying to get under the skin of that service and how it's funded, but we have got, without breaching anyone's privacy, we've got some long-term sick on there that needs addressing through occupational therapy and things like that, but we need to address that. We had 2 bank holidays in the first quarter because of the coronation. Now, when we don't stop collecting bins on bank holidays, but the staff get paid extra for working bank holidays, that wasn't budgeted for. And it's clear now that some of the information that FCC gave us when we were transferring the service in wasn't strictly accurate. And so the budget that was originally set for the waste service it reflected the figures that FCC gave us, but didn't reflect the actual staff that were stupid over. So again, that is having to be addressed. I think I've said all I want to say, and I will throw myself on the mercy of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Thomason.
One other thing, sorry. My iPad is refusing to acknowledge through modern.gov that this meeting is taking place. So I'm using the report that's going to Cabinet on Wednesday. So I can, if you say paragraph number, I'll be all right. If you say page number, it will mean absolutely nothing to me. So if you can just forgive me if I struggle a little bit to keep up with where some of the questions are coming from.
Okay, thank you. And rest assured, we'll help you out in terms of navigating to that. Welcome, Jeannie, to, I think, your first scrutiny meeting. So thank you for coming. I'll start off with the questions. Following the news of Birmingham City Council declaring itself virtually bankrupt last week, and other councils predicted to be in a similar position, what reassurance can you give us and our residents that we will not be in a similar position?
Thank you. I think Birmingham, whilst other councils have gone as well, across all political controls, so Conservative councils have gone, Labour councillors have gone. I think in Birmingham's case, the fairly specific reasons. The reassurance I would give you is, councillors said that our general reserve should be at £4 million to cover eventualities, just our rainy day fund, £4 million. Last year, we were able to put £300,000 in to that, so it currently stands at £4.5 million. And should we continue on the path that we are going, we're going to overspend our budget by 300,000 this year, which will bring the reserve down to 4.2. So still £200,000 above the figure that council has said we should try and maintain our reserves at. Also, of course, a lot of the bigger authorities that are really, really struggling, it's because of social care. Massive pressures on children's social care and adult social care, and they are not South Ribble's responsibilities. They sit with the county council, and they're having their own difficulties in trying to address that. But as far as resilience, financial resilience is concerned, I would suggest that in Lancashire, we're probably in the upper quartile of councils that have got robust finances. And as long as I sit in this position, that's where we'll continue to be, I hope.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you. And I think, I guess the number of caveats at the start of this may be indicative of some of the reporting here. I wanted to push you to paragraph 7, page 40 for everybody else, about the minimum level of reserve. How confident are you that we'll actually be able to maintain a minimum level of 4 mil?
Yeah, and I have to say the figure of 4 million is an arbitrary figure. It's not based on recommendations for government. It's not based on anything other than what council have agreed, and it reflects roughly where we've been for the past probably 10 years or so. We've tried to keep a reserve at about that figure. As you heard me say earlier, we put more money in last year because we spent a bit less than we thought we would. We are projected to overspend, as you've heard, but that is only a projection. But in a worst case scenario where we do overspend by that figure and we're not able to address the things that I've already talked about, we would still only come down to 4.2 if we overspend by 0.3 of a million. So we would still be above the figure that council has agreed.
Councillor Howarth.
I could just pick up on something you said there. You said that we'd kept the level at around 4 million for the last 10 years. In real terms, then it's reducing.
Yeah, it is a little bit as our overall budget grows, as a percentage of, if you like, our reserve as a percentage of the council's annual revenue budget, then it is reducing. But as a fixed figure, and it's, I can't hold my hand up and say that I can tell you what the general reserve was in 2015-16 or 17-18, but it's been roughly consistent. And I think it's about 2 or 3 years since council agreed it should stay at about 4 million, and there are no plans to change that.
It is also just worth noting that actually when you look at SIP for benchmarking and benchmarking against our peers across Lancashire, £4 million as a general reserve is actually relatively large, even taking into consideration. So we do and Louise, as Section 151 officer, has to confirm this as part of the budget setting process, and as part of her doing that, she does those checks across SIP for benchmarking and other places.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Councillor Tomlinson. And Jeannie, thank you very much for taking questions. Just going to refer you to quite a few of the paragraphs, actually. Paragraph 16 and paragraph 18, more notably. It's been quite a significant overspend. This is just in Q1 on agency staff. What sort of things are we doing to actually reduce that spend? Because if we extrapolate the one in paragraph 18, we've spent 189k over just in Q1. So if that was to happen in Q2, 3 and 4, that's effectively an overspend of 800, possibly potentially 800k. So what are we doing to try and combat the use of agency staff?
I had a paid service. Referring specifically to waste, we will be undertaking significant amounts of work in Q2 now around identifying what the reasons are. Councillor Tomlinson has identified what are the reasons why we've had that overspend. So some of it is practicalities of having bank holidays. Some of it is the information that we got as part of the TUPE transfer of staff from FCC, and some of it is around operational decisions that we have made to ensure that the service is resilient. We need to check that and make sure actually we're not overstaffing and making sure that we're actually staffing to the level that we need to undertake the work, and that's what's happening right now. In terms of agency staff elsewhere, so that's a very specific reason within waste. Agency staff elsewhere, we've got the people strategy which I referred to under the last agenda item. We have been successful in recruiting to, and for paragraph 16, that's particularly property. So we have been very heavily reliant upon agency building and estate surveyors. We have now recruited to, I think, all but maybe one of our vacant posts. And going back to the last agenda item, building surveyors, estate surveyors is also a profession which is highly competitive. So we have had the senior estate surveyor start and the senior building surveyor start within the last few months. So that agency requirement has reduced significantly. And then just finally on the agency staff, some of that in Q1 is partially because the council took a decision when it was bringing the waste services back in-house to try and reduce actually over the long term the use of agency. FCC had operated most of the contracts using agency. We are moving towards having people more directly employed who are delivering our service, and some of this will be overlap between those two things happening.
Okay, thank you for that. Obviously, looking at the revenue outturn, and obviously there's been overspends and things like that on things like agency staff. Can you tell us what the main particular risks are to this year's budget? Obviously, agency staff is a lot more than forecasted. We know about utility bills and things like that. What risks do you see may come in further into the financial year that we need to be cognizant of?
Well, I think a risk, the leisure service will be a risk, and heating 3 swimming pools will be a risk, and that has not yet fed through although I'm sure at some stage the leisure company, if you remember last year, the leisure company had to come to council and ask for further funding to keep the 3 pools open. Energy costs have not decreased much, if at all, since then. So I would highlight that as a risk. And the other risk, I think, and it's not a new one really, it's trying to deliver on our corporate priorities, operating in a world where public sector pay isn't keeping pace with private sector pay. Whilst, I've said on average, people have had a 7% increase, but the people who, because it's a flat increase of £1,900, the more qualified you are and the higher up the scale you go, that's a smaller and smaller percentage increase. So the really skilled people who are already on higher wages are falling further and further behind in local government, leading to the questions that were asked of Councillor Belinsky-Gelder about why is it difficult to recruit. So I think that's a risk, and it's not a new risk. It's a risk that's grown over the last 10 years or so.
Councillor King, you.
I know there's been quite a lot of talk throughout this evening just about the staff vacancies and what they're doing. Obviously, we'd want to reduce in terms of agency costs as much as we can, so we aren't inflating that number. Last time we were here, we put forward some recommendations in terms of how is it that we're going to make people aware that South Ribble are recruiting. One of the ways I put forward was how nowadays the way people are looking for jobs, now about 70% of people are looking on LinkedIn. It's a lot more social and things like that. And one of the recommendations we put forward was for the council to actually advertise those jobs on those sites that are now where a lot of these are being searched. I've got it again here, and it still says there's no jobs right now. And it's something that's such an easy change, such an easy win that would solve, at least partially solve, some of the issues that we're having in terms of agency staff, in terms of active health, but nothing's been done. So when can that actually be implemented? Because it's not a big lift.
So firstly, to reassure you, we do make significant use of LinkedIn, so that we have a consultant within the HR team who will do direct approaches to people. We are in the process, and I think the reports have actually been through various committees. We are in the process of changing our recruitment system, which will make it significantly easier for us to be able to manage that and be making use of LinkedIn advertising. So that will be coming very rapidly in the next month or so. But yes, just to reassure you, we have been doing quite a lot of direct approaches to people in those high demand jobs.
Well, in terms of the advertisements, I've literally got the site up right now, and whatever this consultant's been doing, they haven't been putting applications up on the South Ribble Borough Council site. And that surely is a really obvious and substantial place to start recruiting people. If people want a job at the council and they go onto the council website and it says, oh, there's no jobs, then it's not perfect, is it? So this consultant, whatever they're doing, they need to kind of start with step one.
No, but I think we need to be careful that consultant is an officer, so we need to be polite about the way that we talk about the way they do their job. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing to say is just looking at our website, we have 3 jobs currently being advertised. They will be getting advertised on Greater Jobs, which is effectively for local government one of the key, if not the key, vacancy job for the North West. It covers all of Greater Manchester local authorities plus quite a number of others. But you are right, and I'll take that on and we'll do it.
I apologise if I've come across as impolite for that. All I'm requesting for is for the website, the LinkedIn site, to have job applications on.
Thank you, Councillor King, and thank you for your apology. I don't think there was any intention to speak about any individual, as we would never do that. Councillor Howarth.
With the financial challenges affecting local government and potentially this council, what are we doing to ensure that we're delivering good value for money for our residents?
I think the report that you heard previous to me is a good way we keep a track on that. Which again is monitored and reported quarterly. And as far as the cabinet are concerned, that is what we tend to focus our energies on, delivering on the corporate strategy. So the corporate strategy, as you know, isn't just magicked up out of thin air. It's something that's worked on in consultation with members and partners to agree the strategic direction that we want to go in. And the thing that would tell us that we're not achieving what we should be for our residents is when that report starts being populated with red. Is it red? Red, not blue, green, red, red. Targets. At the moment, that's not the case, despite all the challenges we've had as far as the corporate performance is concerned. It reflects well on what our staff are doing.
Okay. Councillor Pillinger.
Have we skipped one of the questions? Or have the answers already given so far actually made some of the questions unnecessary? I'm referring to revenue outturns on paragraph 12, which I was down to ask a question about, but I think that's already been covered largely by the questions we've already had.
Okay, if you're happy with the responses we've had already.
We've talked about the overspend, and in the introduction we were told more about it. I suppose my only question is actually, we know about you've told us about some of the extraordinary expenditures in the overspend. How linear is the track of our spending over a year? We've got 1 quarter. If we assume that it's a linear thing, then 1 quarter doubles up, the next quarter doubles up over the whole year again. But actually, I can't imagine any budget over a year is that linear. Would that be correct?
That's absolutely correct. There are seasonal things, and the fact, for instance, that we've had 2 bank holidays that weren't budgeted for, which have affected costs in waste is a good example. It's a quarter where a lot of staff are on leave, and some of that. So going back to the waste waste collection service, that runs on a driver and 2. I don't know what the term is, refuse collectors. So there's a driver and 2 refuse collectors doing a route. If one of them's on holiday, that has to be filled, because you can't run it with a driver and 1. It's just not physically possible. So that's where some of the agency staff comes in to fill those kind of things. I had quite a long meeting with some of the staff who were organising this to try and unpick it all. And as I said in my opening remarks, the new cabinet member, who's Councillor Ashton, is going to try and really get under the skin of all this. But undoubtedly, in the summer months, there's more leave than there is in the winter months. Some of the things, an extra wage increase that we hadn't budgeted for, and there's no extra funding for, that will continue throughout the year. So I think it's a mixture. But you're right, it's not a straight line. It is never a straight line. And if we can get a grip on some of the things that are highlighted in quarter 1, some of the things will level off, hopefully.
So I think, to carry on from that seems to me that, acknowledging that it's not a straight line, the patterns perhaps should be similar 1 year to the next. So Christmas, for example, is always going to give you more holidays, and therefore you're going to spend more. The winter is always going to be heavier on your energy costs, so you're going to spend more. The summer holidays are going to give you extra expenditure because you're covering for vacancies. Are we able to compare 1 year with the next to see those ebbs and flows of the tide as the year goes through? And I mean, does that help us understand what might be coming up?
Yes. So a lot of our budget is taken up by staffing salaries, and so that is pretty linear. But this report is based upon meetings between management accountants, financial accountants, and the budget holders sitting within directorates. So they will have those conversations based upon previous experience and what we know now. So a lot of the stuff that Councillor Tomlinson has already highlighted is what we know now. So we know that it is almost certain that the minimum pay award that would be given is a flat £1,900 to most members of staff. So we have started to budget that in, and that creates a pressure within the financial year. We know that we have spent so much on housing and homelessness, and so that has come into those figures. So yes, all that information is used to provide this update, and it happens significantly more than once a quarter. The management accountants will be doing that. Well, basically, that's their job, so they'll be doing it all the time, but they will be doing it at least on a monthly basis of checking against what we thought we were going to spend by this point in the year against where we're at now.
Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Chair. And paragraph 17. Homelessness. There's a little paragraph there. Could you just talk us through what's meant by homelessness prevention from what we do and how the grant is used, please?
So homelessness obviously, in all ills in the world, prevention is better than cure. Okay, so rather than wait till someone is homeless, it's really important that we can identify people at risk of homelessness. And I think, as I've said, I think one of the focuses of the new social prescribers will be to work with people who are vulnerable around that. We've always had a grant from the government, and we've always had a budget. But as you can see, the homelessness prevention grant is 79,000, and we think in supporting homelessness people, we're on target to spend 600,000. So it's not really touching the sides, if you'll forgive my use of the vernacular. And we've always had a budget as well that's been fairly consistent, but it's just being blown out of the water at the moment with the increased pressure that people are under. So we need to do more. I think Aniela talked about some of the things that we're hoping to do, but we do need to get that figure down. And some of that, I've no doubt, we'll be having some difficult conversations with some of the people who present as homeless to whether they are statutory homeless or not, because there are rules about what counts as homeless, and you can't just come into the council and say, I'm homeless, help me. We've tried our best since the pandemic eased off, because it feels like suddenly it's not ended anymore, it's coming back a bit. But since it eased off, we've tried our best to help everybody that's presented as homeless. And I think there is little or no doubt that can't continue.
Yeah, so just because I'm new, just my understanding of that, the grant money, is that just to cover the cost of the rent for temporary accommodations and things like that? Is that
just a general service provision? So it just goes into the pot for homelessness. We can spend it on staff or rents, on B&Bs, and all those kind of temporary accommodations. You know, as I said, so on one hand, we're not being given anywhere near enough money to cope with the pressure that we're under. On the other hand, we're measured by the government about how long people can be in temporary accommodation. And if they're in longer, then suddenly we're not meeting our statutory figures. But there's at the moment, there is very, very little options on where these poor people can go. Because as I said earlier, the private sector is just out of a lot of people in the private sector who were buy-to-let landlords are now selling up because the mortgage rate has gone up. And so, and as the housing benefit figure has stayed low, people who are in receipt of housing benefit can't use it to cover the rent because it just doesn't. So a lot of buy-to-let landlords are selling up, and those houses are just going into the private ownership. And as I said, social providers aren't building at the moment. I mean, we tried our best, haven't we? We built 15 properties. We've put 9 flats in Bamber Bridge out, and we'll be providing 80, 75, 80, the figure keeps moving, however many flats it is next door, which will release, as people move into those, that will release housing as well. But it's a challenge, and it's not just a challenge for South Ribble, it's a challenge nationally.
Right, thanks for clarifying. It's a major concern, isn't it?
Councillor Pillinger.
One of the areas which often creates more heat than light is what's happened with the parking. We know there's going to be a review at 6 months. Can you tell us when that 6 months review starts and when we're going to hear anything about that? I take that in particular because on page 44, third bullet point, I don't know what paragraph that is, I'm sorry, but there is a 20% reduction, is there, in income from parking so far in the new regime?
I don't know if I like the word new regime. It sounds a bit more officious than we tend to think of ourselves. Those people who've been on the council previous to the election will remember there was a big review into car parking provision by the former cabinet member Sue Jones with another former cabinet member Bill Evans. They did a lot of work, presented a paper to council 2 years ago, probably, with the pandemic, and then we were physically unable to get the machines. We were physically unable to source the machines to implement the new scheme. It meant that a scheme that council had agreed 2 years ago only came into force just before the elections in April. There's no doubt it caused some confusion for some of our residents, and listening to what people were saying to us about that confusion, we took the decision to stop enforcement. So we weren't fining people, but what we were doing, we were encouraging our staff to go out onto the car parks at busy times and actually stand by the machines and explain to especially some of our more elderly or vulnerable people how to use the machines. It's a shame there's been a lot of, you said it creates a lot of heat rather than light, because actually the regime that was, see what I did there, the regime that was introduced was actually better in terms of offering free car parking to the previous regime. So we extended how long you could park for free. For instance, at Worden Park, it used to be limited to 90 minutes. We extended it to 2 hours. We put in a free hour on all our other charge car parking. These were all, whereas before you could only park free in the blue bays. Now it was the entire car park. So it improved the offer, but the implementation of it undoubtedly caused some confusion for some of our car park users. So we, as I said, we took the decision not to enforce, to educate, and now we're going to. I think we're into. I don't know if the cabinet members set a date. I think, as I recollect, she said, "Let's wait until the scheme's been in for 6 months, and then we'll see what the response is." But you'd have to ask that question of the cabinet member, I think.
So can we, from the committee, send a message to the cabinet member asking that question, because we are actually over the 6 months from last April?
Absolutely. We will do that. Thank you. Councillor Green.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Councillor Thomason, and thanks for your report. Could I take you to paragraph 20 and to the bullet point at the bottom of page 44, or on the cabinet papers, I think it's the bottom of page 54, and reference to the 59,000 overspend on Word and All. Please, could you take us through the reason for the delays to the full operation of the venue? Have these issues now been resolved, and what can we learn for the future, please?
I think the thing we can learn is that when you're dealing with grade 2 listed buildings that are over 200 years old, things happen. So the drain collapse that happened in the late winter, early spring. Nobody foresaw that. The drains had been inspected at the beginning of the original work, and then within a few weeks of the cafe opening, collapsed completely, and that set us back quite a long way. We have now got the staff in place to get this place fully operational, and members who are up to date with their emails may have read an email today from Neil Anderson saying that we've got our first wedding booked in October. So again, this is an issue that Cabinet are keen to get a grip on and see moving forward. It's been, let's be honest, it's been more challenging than we thought, and it's been more difficult than we thought. But we are on with it. And as I said, the first wedding, I think I might even go and stand outside and watch, just so I could say that for the first wedding, I was there. But it does sound like we're making progress, and I know that I think, does this now sit with the leaders' portfolio? Sits with the leaders' portfolio, so he's very keen to see the success of Worden Hall.
Councillor King.
So please can I bring your attention to page 55? Unfortunately, Councillor Tomlinson, it's called current staffing vacancies. I know you've not got the page numbers or appendix 4. A review of staffing costs across the sports development is currently taking place. What's the timescale involved and what is hoped to be achieved from the review?
Okay, so the current staffing vacancies appendix is something that I insisted on when I was chair of scrutiny, and I still get asked about it every time I present my quarterly reports. Why I asked for this to be a regular report is so that members of scrutiny could keep an eye on it, so we're not carrying vacancies to make savings, so that any vacancies that we have are there for an operational reasons, and that people can see what is actually being done about it. I have to be really honest with you. I'm not up to speed with where the review is. I don't know if the head of paid service is, but I'm going to look to him to try and provide you with an answer.
So people will be aware that Howard Anthony became head of communities and housing a couple of months ago. So he's kind of getting himself up to speed and understanding. The anticipated timescales for the review of the Active Health team will be in November, December time. That's partially so that Howard can get himself up to speed. Is also partially so that we can time various staffing changes happening across the organisation so we can support it. In the meantime, there are temporary arrangements in place using staff in terms of temporary honoraria and other payments that people can act up into different roles, but around about November, December time.
And a similar trend, Councillor Green.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Again, the same page, which is page 55 or page 65 of the Cabinet note papers. With regard to staff vacancies in customer and digital, there's a reference to a report going to members and we're awaiting a decision regarding funding. Please, could you clarify what's meant by awaiting that member decision?
I shouldn't pull that. I should have a better poker face, shouldn't I? So I think this is more to do with the point in time that the report was written. So I think there has been an executive member decision taken on tweaking some of the jobs within ICT to make sure it's fit for purpose, but also to make sure that we're recruiting against what the market currently is. So I think that decision was made probably just after this report was drafted. I'd need to double check though.
Yeah, thank you for that. And could you tell us what timescale is planned for the filling of the vacancies there, and also the vacancies on the next page?
Is that specifically the ones in customer and digital and ICT? The executive member decision that has been made, I think we may well already be on with the recruitment actually for those now. So I think quite a few of these would drop out. I do know there was interviews last week, I think, for at least one of the posts.
Councillor Williams.
Yes, just one here. Preston Council have stated today that the Guildhall is going to be closed indefinitely while a detailed survey is going to be carried out into RAC issues and concrete issues. Are we aware of any properties within our portfolio that may or may not need to be inspected, and any budgetary requirements from that?
At this stage, I'm not aware of any. Obviously, that would come under estates rather than my portfolio, but certainly not aware of any. No.
And the final question from myself. We have spoken previously in previous scrutiny meetings about an asset register. And I was wondering, are we any closer to obtaining that? And when might we see that as a committee?
Again, that was my previous portfolio. It's not my responsibility at the moment, but you'll recall, I think we've been to Cabinet on the purchase of the IT system. So that's now been purchased. These are bespoke systems. And it's my understanding that we're now we're planning on how to populate that system. So a lot of the issues that we've had previously and that we tried to resolve over the last 4 years, but only went part way, is that we've got all the information on all of our assets, but it's spread all over the place. So legal have got some of the documents, and compliance have got some of the documents, and the estates department have got some of the documents. So whether it's my ambition when it was my portfolio was I should be able to walk in here and say, tell me about this property that we own at Boxer Place along Meanygate, and you should be able to, type it into a computer and it comes up everything about it, how much we're getting in rent, when the rent review's done, whether a Legionnaires test has been done, when the gas safety check was done, when the building was last inspected. All that information has been available, but it's been in different places with different teams. The whole point of this new system that we've now purchased and are beginning to populate is that my ambition will be realised. I think it's quite a big job, though. It is quite a big job, so it's going to take some time, and it's going to need some officer resource, which I believe is being organised at the moment, for somebody to literally sit with this. I'm not going to say spreadsheet because it's much cleverer than that, but basically it's a spreadsheet that needs somebody to sit down and say, right, this is when the rent was last looked at, this is when the review's done, this is when, and it's going to need somebody to do some digging and some work, but it will be well worth doing, and it's something we've been trying to get done for a while, as you know.
Okay, thank you. That's all questions from members on the committee. Have we got any questions from members not on committee? No. We don't have any members of the public here in the meeting or online. So can we please formulate the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Just some of the themes from the discussion tonight that the committee might like to recommend. The committee thanks the Cabinet member, Chief Executive and Principal Financial Accountant for attending and answering questions. The committee asks that job vacancies be advertised more effectively via social media and sites such as LinkedIn in the future. The committee welcomes the reassurance that the overspends in the waste service are being closely monitored and reviewed. The committee requests an update on the 6-month evaluation of the car park changes proposed by the Cabinet member. The committee welcomes the progress made in making Worden Hall operational, and the committee asks for an update on recruiting to vacant posts within the Customer and Digital Directorate. Thank you, Chair.
Are you all happy with those recommendations? Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so then we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the 23-24 capital programme and balance sheet monitoring report. Again, Councillor Tomlinson is here to present the report, and he's supported again by the Chief Executive and the Principal Financial.
Yeah, my comments on this are really very brief. It's Q1. You'll see in the report it highlights the funding that Council agreed for Tidygate Playground. And again highlights the new funding that again was agreed by full council for Jubilee Gardens. There are some reprofiling, as there always is. but it's Q1 and there's a long way to go. If people have any questions on the capital programme, I'm quite sure we can try and answer them. But other than that, I've very little to say on them at this early stage in the year.
Okay, thank you. I'll start in terms of on page 58 or paragraph 9, in terms of the capital investment programme. Do we have the capacity to deliver the programme?
This has been a perennial question, and if we're honest, I think looking back, sometimes we've been very ambitious for this council, and we make no apology for that. And at times, it's been a struggle. But we've now got bespoke people helping us to deliver the town deal, so we've learned lessons from that. And as we sit here today, I'm as confident as I can be that we've got a team who can deliver on these projects.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Page 61, which I believe is page 35 in the Cabinet papers. The amount of money that's owed to South Ribble Borough Council appears to have increased significantly when compared with last year. Do we know why? And what are we actually actively doing to recover this money, please?
So at this stage, it's difficult to say exactly why. It's very easy to say, there's a cost of living crisis and that businesses are struggling. Certainly, income so far from business rates is down on where it was last year. All these bills, though, the statutory, people have to pay the council tax, and we'll continue to make sure that where we can recover this money, we will recover this money. And I think, whilst it is down, it is only Q1, and we'll have to wait and see how things progress. But, people do have to pay the council tax, and they do have to pay the business rates. We have a good track record of getting money in. We do try our best to be as supportive of people as we can who are struggling. But at the end of the day, anybody who goes to any debt advice will always be told the first thing you have to pay is your council tax, because that's just the law. That is the law. So I'm quite proud of how we've handled this. We don't go in with a big stick and beat people over the head, but we do have a really good track record for recovery, and we'll continue on that way of dealing with our customers for as long as we can.
Councillor Howarth.
Yeah, on the other side of the coin, what policy do we have in place for settling our debts? So clearly we have invoices coming to us. Is there a set period that we make sure those are paid? Because clearly we need to support local businesses as well.
Yeah, we have a policy, and we endeavour to pay our debts within 30 days. I'm not sure how well we do that, but that is the policy, and that is what we endeavour to do. Yeah, I've just been told we're pretty good at it too.
Councillor Howarth, I think you had another question.
Bring him in again. Right, page 72, Leisure Local. Could you talk us through the return on investment from Leisure Local?
No, I can't, frankly. It's a question you need to ask to the Cabinet member. If I'm right, are you asking for returning on investment? What do we get out of the money that we spend in terms of physical activity, things like that? I'm afraid I don't have that detail to hand.
Thank you. I'd far rather you were straight and honest than make it up.
I think that could be something we ask the Cabinet member when they come in front of us in the future, I think. So I don't think there's any more questions from members of the committee. So I will ask any questions from members not on committee. There's no members of the public here. Can we formulate any recommendations, please, Aaron?
Thank you, Chair. Just some suggestions. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member, Chief Executive and Principal Management Accountant for attending and answering questions. The committee asks that further information be provided on the return on investment from the Leisure Local Initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Are we happy with those recommendations? Okay. Thank you for attending tonight. We appreciate it. Moving to agenda item 8, which is the scrutiny matters and the establishment of a task group in terms of looking at a cultural strategy. If we do have any volunteers wishing to be part of the task group, then please let either myself or Darren know at the earliest opportunity. Meetings and training attended by committee members. Now, I know that many members attended the training by Dr. Steph Snape, which I thought was really useful, particularly as the council has taken the approach of 2 scrutiny committees for the first time. And I thought that was really useful for all members to participate in, those who were more experienced in scrutiny and those who are new to it as well. So I think that was useful. Has anyone any comments on that training or potential other training moving forward?
Only that she was good. I've come across a lot of training that's far worse than that. She only sort of, I wouldn't want to qualify that. She was very good.
Okay, thank you. We'll make sure that that's passed on, please, Darren, if that's okay. And we are minded to look at the Cabinet Forward Plan as well and review this. And if there's any issues that you might like to consider moving forward. And also that of the Corporate Performance and Budget Scrutiny Committee Forward Plan also. And we have discussed about also incorporating portfolio updates within that. And that's a fluid position that we take as a committee. And if you have any comments regarding that, then please contact myself as chair or Darren, and we will look to discuss that moving forward. And with that, I would like to bring the meeting to an end and thank you all for your attendance and participation. Thanks very much.